Just a brief introduction, just to get us rolling. Part of what we did in promoting this course was to circulate a statement, which I think is a good one to actually bring us back to in order to sort of get back to where we, to get back to the motivation behind all of this. I'll just read it out to you. The operation of kufr is not a conspiracy theory. It functions as a complete system, and by Allah's permission, that system is open to mankind, and nothing short of the right knowledge and guidance will prevent you from drifting into its domains. Therefore, if you are unable to recognize the subtle boundaries and the deceptive contours of that system, you may become confused by it, or worse still, end up admiring it, believing in it, and relying upon it, thereby incorporating it into your deen. It has taken the shock of the 2008 international banking crisis for many people in the world, Muslims included, to grasp that banking, international commerce, and all the national economies that depend on them are nothing but worldwide, usury, ribawi management systems governed by the pseudo-scientific principles of macroeconomics. The Muslims should have been the first to raise the alarm, but remained passive and complacent. It is now clear for all of us to see, to our incalculable cost, that it has now become the prime responsibility of governments not to serve the interests of their citizens, but to ensure that the demands of the financial markets are met. As one, nearly all of the major countries in the world are in sovereign debt crises. To keep their positions, they are obliged to inflict structural austerity measures on their citizenry, resulting in economic stagnation and continuous reductions in public services. Two, corporations are also in debt. To survive, they are forced to streamline and rationalize their operations by making redundancies. The standards of the goods they produce, including the food that we eat, is in perpetual decline. Three, millions of families and individuals of all social classes are in debt. To stay above the water, they have to take on more debt and work longer hours. Unemployment and underemployment are rife, and many are going under. On every level, in almost every country, deep financial anxiety is now the norm. This gives rise to a number of fundamental questions which affect us all. How do you get by? How do you get married? How do you feed your family? How can you possibly save enough money for the expenses of old age? Not least, what are the long-term mental health implications for the entire world population of this relentless anxiety, and in addition to the pro-psychotic conditioning of legally enforced submission to the illusion that digitally created, debt-based, electronically numerated fiat money is real wealth. Now, in the midst of everything else that we see going on in the world, and that we're all almost stunned by in terms of the rapidness of the confusion and chaos that we see going on around us, we've got these questions. And it's all interlinked, and there's no separation between what is going on in the wider world and the subjects that we'll be looking at and exploring over the course of these 2 weekends. And it's kind of important that we bear in mind that our priorities, in terms of the faculty itself, is to make sure that somewhere, not just in the Muslim world, but in the world, as I've hinted, it's important that the Muslims take the lead. It's what we're here for. That these matters are being thought about. They're being understood and interpreted. Not just for our own benefit as Muslims, but for the benefit of the world as a whole. Excuse me. And so that is a priority for the faculty. And this is why we do all this. And it's why we're here this weekend. This is a major matter which needs to be understood. And what we hope is that in the course of the whole weekend and the second weekend, that you will be equipped to avoid drifting into the domains of kufr, as I described earlier in the statement. It's subtle and it is effective. And it exists by Allah, and it is attractive and effective in its surrounding of human beings. We cannot sit here thinking that because we're Muslims, we're immune. Far from it. We're just as vulnerable as everybody else. But we have an added responsibility in terms of being in the best position to understand what is going on and to make that understanding clear to ourselves, primarily, and then to the rest of the world, who it is our obligation to care for and look out for. The other thing that is important for us as a faculty is that we offer the possibility of, for students, we know that as Muslims we are very good students, we fill the universities, and but I know from my own experience that many of our young students, and as parents we push our young children and so on into universities, and they're being pushed anyway. But there's a kind of malaise, there's a kind of sense, they'll ask themselves, what am I doing here? They spend hours and hours working and striving to do MAs, to do PhDs, and all of this kind of thing. But there's a nagging doubt as to whether or not that effort is going to be acceptable to Allah on the last day. And that is not an easy burden to be carrying when you're committed, not just financially, but also in terms of your time and effort and your mental effort as students in university. So what the faculty holds out is an arena in which students, advanced students who are studying subjects that are important to everyone, can actually be sure that that effort will stand up for them on the day of rising. The other growing anxiety that as Muslims that we're all faced with, and which is typified, there are so many examples, but the most typical one has been this relatively recent and ongoing controversy around the Trojan horse affair. Now, these things are happening, and they're happening thick and fast. And what happens is that we, as Muslims, we become paranoid, we begin to feel that we're being targeted, and there are two reactions. One reaction is to strike out and strike back. The other reaction is to keep our heads down and to be good, quiet Muslims, blameless, not saying things when perhaps we ought to be speaking out. Now, that's the other priority that we have, as the faculty, because what we don't want to find ourselves doing is just falling into that kind of dichotomy. We're either going to strike out madly in terms of, accusing everybody of Islamophobia or whatever other mechanism we want to sort of describe and accuse, and just trying to come across as very reasonable, good and moderate Muslims. That's not something that we ought to be stuck in terms of our options. And so what we offer is an arena such as this, whereby we can find ways of expressing what we have to express in a safe zone, knowing that it's almost like a workshop. It's a workshop for enabling the Muslims to become more articulate in terms of what their real understanding is, in terms of what our real position is, that doesn't get stuck between being moderate and being extreme, but is based on an understanding of what is actually going on. That understanding has to be generated somewhere and articulated by any one of us. You know what it's like. We're all on social media in some way or the other, which is, without being paranoid, becoming something of a dragnet for, with all of these surveillance techniques that we know are being applied, for finding suspect characters. And never mind those of us who might appear in the media, and sort of being interviewed and things like that. We need to know what it is that we're saying and have good reasons for saying it and saying it articulately. And this is part of what we hope to supply ourselves and the Muslims generally with, a discourse and a critique that will be unimpeachable in terms of the effort that's gone into it, in terms of thinking behind it and the understanding that drives it, and the good intention. So with that, it's our prayer and hope that that these 2 weekends will meet and exemplify, and that your experience will be sort of borne out by these matters I've raised.